Hello and welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm your host, Daniel Tran. We've prepared stories turning heads and making headlines around the world today. As usual, to help dissect them down to digestible bites, we are joined by Song Se-ryun from Kyung University, Professor of Law. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure to be here, Daniel.
Right, well, you know the drill. Let's get to the point.
Right. A lot of things happened as expected in the world, so it took a while to narrow it down to topics, but I did select 3 topics here. Explosion, unfairness, and WECO.
And we appreciate you spending sleepless nights coming up with the global attention grabbers and the keywords that exemplify what they are. Unfortunately, I feel one of them is less cryptic than others, and I believe they might be about the deadly explosions in Sri Lanka. So the first word of the day, Professor?
Sadly, you're correct. That's what happened in Sri Lanka, and we'll take a look at that.
Explosions it is.
On April 21st, marking Easter Sunday, more than 300 people have been either killed or injured in a horrific series of bombings in Sri Lanka. The deadly blast hit 8 buildings, including 3 churches, 3 luxury hotels, a guest house, and a public residence in the nation's capital, Colombo, and 4 other cities. More damages have occurred, particularly in churches where special events to celebrate Easter were getting underway. Among the victims were foreign travelers from England, India, Denmark, and China.
During the 30 years of civil war, we had lots of explosions in Colombo. We are used to our airport getting blown up and the central bank, things like that. But it's been 10 years of peace and we got used to that. So that's why it's really surprising and shocking.
Sri Lanka's defense ministry called the explosions a terrorist attack conducted by religious extremists and declared it would form an emergency special committee to take all necessary steps. Police said they apprehended and are investigating suspected terrorists, whom reportedly are all Sri Lankans. After all attacks, Sri Lankan authorities imposed curfews and closures across the country and also shut down social media such as Facebook, WhatsApp, and YouTube to prevent fake news from spreading.
The series of blasts took place on Easter Sunday, so clearly this was an attack that was motivated by religious groups, an anti-religious movement against churches.
I mean, unfortunately, several factors kind of came together to create this kind of terrible act. Clearly, it's a jihadist suicide bombing attack against the civilians, actually, of all people, Sunday's worshiping crowd. I think it's terrible, but the selection of those churches probably is very highly symbolic because it's kind of a part of the religious war. And the dysfunction that you mentioned is pretty significant because there were telltale signs and there were tips about what might happen, terrible things might happen, and the coordination from outside even. But then this was disregarded because of the squabbles that leadership had in this country. So it's a lesson for other countries that for the security reasons, you got to take heed and give attention to whatever the signs that are provided about the terrorist act or some acts that threatens your security.
A wake-up call for authorities and governments, and of course our hearts and prayers go out to the victims and the families, and we do wish those involved in the aftermath efforts to rescue or search for survivors, they are safely carrying out their duties.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to our second word. It doesn't sound very positive either. What is it, Professor?
The key word is unfairness, and it's about, I think you might have heard of it, the Yellow Jackets.
Right, let's take a look.
Fire rises and tear gas is unleashed in downtown Paris. Demonstrators and police engage in physical brawl. The lately languished Yellow Vest protest has been reignited by the fire that partially destroyed Notre Dame Cathedral. The protesters took the streets in yellow vests again as French President Emmanuel Macron, who remained silent on calls to solve issues related to social inequalities and wealth polarization, has eagerly joined some of the nation's most wealthiest figures to restore the cathedral.
La justice fiscale et la justice du partage des biens, je trouve que Notre-Dame, c'est un grand malheur. Mais la pierre peut passer après l'humain quand même. Hein. Et je pense que si l'humain il avait un peu plus d'argent, il pourrait aussi financer les réparations de Notre-Dame. Voilà. Alors moi, je trouve ça dégueulasse.
With nearly 1 billion euros collected to restore the Catholic monument, some French conglomerates have faced public backlash for mentioning potential tax deductions on shelling out fortunes for donation. French law says donation to restore cultural assets in crisis of loss could receive tax break of up to 90%. The notion that corporations might have wanted the tax incentives more so than restoring the cathedral has angered the public.
Well, initially it started out as a meaningful gathering. Many regular Joes were there protesting against government reform measures that were deemed to favor the elite.
Right.
But unfortunately, this time they're responding to acts of generosity by the elite.
Right. The Yellow Jackets obviously had months and months of protests, and it's an expression of dissatisfaction against government, and their particular theme is inequality. As you said, this is pretty ironic that this national landmark kind of burning insignificantly. And it was initially a heartwarming story that these billionaires and rich people kind of got together in very fast actions and raised over 1 billion euros. The Yellow Jacket protesters looked at it and said, wait a minute, our protests that lasted months and months didn't get any response from the Macron, and there was a delayed response of anything. This accident, however terrible it is, nobody died, and then in a matter of hours, there's a 1 billion euros raised. So they were looking at it as a kind of indication or the symbolic act or a kind of a representative picture or caricature of the society where the real trouble is not addressed while this is in their mind an accident that doesn't really involve human lives gets proper attention in a short period of time.
They've always been angry. Perhaps the timing raises a lot of question. One concerning fact is that they are united in frustration against government, various factions, including some extremely violent ones. But ironically, the leaders are not having clear demand at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing. The Yellow Jackets started out as just the expression of dissatisfaction. And
Fuel tax raises was their hair trigger initially.
Right, and their demands were, in many people's mind, pretty vague. So they were kind of leaving it up to the government to address their dissatisfaction and come up with some policies. I think there was some indication that they were getting organized politically, so there was some movement about how to translate it or articulate it in the policy terms. But it seems like, looking at this incident, it seems like it's still a kind of an emotional reaction to their dissatisfaction.
I believe many analysts think that their latest emotional outbursts may not be very constructive in helping them to gather more supporters in the near future. Well, let's move on to our last word of the day, Professor.
It's a wacky situation, and the word properly is wacky.
So I fear it's not something very pleasant. Let's take a look.
A recent revelation in the United States that an ordinary consulting firm was actually a cult group behind some serious sex crimes has put the whole country in shock. What came as even bigger shock for many is that Allison Mack, an actress known for her role on a successful television series, Smallville, and Claire Bronfman, an heiress to a global whisk maker, Seagram, have recruited other women into the secret sect. Found in 1998, NXIVM has expanded into a cult group with around 16,000 members. The women who were lured into the organization were forced to have sex with the group founder Keith Raniere. Raniere called himself a spiritual guide and groomed the women into his sex slaves and branded them with his initials. It was revealed recently through investigation that Raniere sexually exploited teenage girls and filmed child porn. He denied making of any child pornography and said all sexual encounters were consensual.
Yeah, it's quite disturbing. It's unfortunate that certain very talented individuals, obviously the leader of the cult, just saw the opportunity to take advantage of people who needed some form of guidance and healing sessions or emotional support.
To these kind of things, you tend to say, why would anybody do this? But then you see this kind of time and time again, the religious cults or those followings that people seemingly blindly follow the leader. In this case, the leader is said to be very charismatic in their mind and their eyes, and also, incredibly, there were you hear about the branding women with not just tattoo is not, but really branding, like the cattle or slaves in the past. So if you think about it in today's terms, it's incomprehensible that this kind of things happen. I think it's the subject of psychological phenomenons, and you got to look into what kind of human psychology makes this kind of things happening and possible.
The main topic of the point looks into outcome of the Mueller report. On April 19th, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's third report on U.S. President Trump's alleged Russian scandal went public. The report, filed after a nearly 2-year-long probe, said although there were indications that could suggest an interaction between Trump and Russia, there was no evidence proving Trump nor his campaign having colluded and obstructed with Russia. Trump took to Twitter that everything about the Mueller investigation was fake and it was a complete hoax.
I'm having a good day too. It was called No Collusion, No Obstruction. And this should never happen to another president again. This hoax, it should never happen to another president again. Thank you.
However, the Democrats left open the possibility of another round against the president, saying that the special report was the beginning of the impeachment. They are also constantly taking shots that they could use Trump's attempt to obstruct the investigation and perjury to push for his impeachment.
On the issue of obstruction of justice, the report outlines multiple attempts by the president to mislead the country, to interfere with the investigation, to make false statements to the American people, and to urge others to lie to the American people, to urge those of his staff to take actions to further obstruct the investigation, which may have been refused, but they were not refused owing to any goodwill or good motive on the president's part.
Experts interpreted the report was written without crystal clarity, as it is neither claiming Trump as guilty nor innocent. Despite report having been drawn up, it might indicate the story on Trump's alleged relations with Russia still has a long road to see its end.
So, 2-year Mueller investigation is wrapped up, but finally we have the full version of the report released, a 448-page full version last week. But on paper, it could be read as Trump's victory. Some are saying there may be more to the case than meets the eye. Certainly there was a difference from the initial version, the summarized version released by the Attorney General, and the recent one, which was the full version.
There were two parts to it. One, they looked into whether there was a conspiracy or collaboration or the coordination with Trump people and with Russian attempt to interfere with the U.S. electoral processes. And they found ample evidence about what Russians did, but in terms of conspiracy or the collaboration, they did not find anything. So the conclusion is pretty clear. But the second part, obstruction of justice, it was pretty emphatic in the report that their investigation would not and did not exonerate the Donald Trump from these suspicions. And this part is probably not very well represented or intentionally misrepresented by the Attorney General Barr, saying that there was nothing to criminally indict the president.
We do have so much to talk about with this latest developments from the United States. First, we'll pick your brains in a while. We're going to now connect via Skype with an expert outside of Korea for more analysis. Adam Rami, Associate Professor of Political Science at New York University, Abu Dhabi, joins us. Hello, Adam.
Hi, how are you?
Now, there are mixed reactions from the states to the full Mueller report, of course, and it looks like the Teflon-coated president comes out relatively unscathed again.
Well, I think most Americans are interpreting the report through their own partisan lenses. So Democratic voters are looking at the report as painting a very unflattering picture of President Trump and his administration. Some of whom among Democratic voters are very open to calls for impeachment proceedings. I think generally speaking, most Republicans are looking at the report and saying there's no direct evidence of collusion. And that was really what the investigation was about. And since the report did not find any strong evidence of collusion, then we should just let this issue go. And I think the remaining voters, the voters who are not affiliated with either party, are somewhere in the middle. President Trump's approval they've only done a couple of polls since the report came out. And the couple of polls that have been done do show a small dip in support for President Trump compared to before, but he has not had a single period where he's been above 50% in his approval rating since he's been in office. So I think for most Americans, this didn't really change their minds. It just confirmed what they already thought before.
All right, Adam, thank you for your take on the matter. Coming back to you, Professor Song, I think what's intriguing is that dictating the tempo somewhat is the term collusion that's been coined by President Donald Trump himself.
He has been using this term throughout this campaign and throughout this investigation. I guess it's his custom fit to the limit, the scope of it. He's saying that there is no direct relationship between the Trump's people and Russia, and indeed, Mueller report or the investigation did not find sufficient evidence to establish that. But in the obstruction of justice side, the Mueller report provides a ample kind of anecdotal and also sufficient evidence that there was at least an attempt and at least an intention to obstruct this investigation, which goes back to the relationship between the Russian interference with the electoral process and the Trump people. So it's hard to draw a conclusion at this point. The Mueller report emphatically say that their investigation shows that it does not exonerate the president from the suspicions. So in a sense, a lot of people are thinking that the Mueller report, because of their scope of the investigation, they're essentially providing the data and kind of punting it to the Congress, saying that because of the political element to it, the Congress has to act if anything should happen.
It's a safe institutional play by the special counsel Robert Mueller.
I think so.
And also, interestingly, there were some reports that the enigmatic president, Donald Trump, refused the direct Mueller interview and instead gave written answers, but they seemed somewhat inadequate.
A lot of people kind of question whether that did not take place. I mean, Mueller ostensibly had the power to subpoena the president, but I think it has to do with the directive that the Justice Department has. They kind of discourage charging or indicting the sitting president. So a lot of people think that Mueller was kind of being consistent with the directives, but at the same time provides enough evidences or the data for the Congress to consider and take the next action, if any.
Right, the facts are organized and kept in a clear folder for now.
Right.
Now, it's time to spin the globe for some interesting happenings in various corners of our world. In this segment, we take you to first, Russia.
This is one of the sequences at a ski tournament recently held in Russia. These brave folks are in their summer clothes, ready to nosedive into icy puddles. Keep in mind, the temperature is sitting comfortably at -3 degrees Celsius. Most participants succeeded at dunking themselves right into the cold water, but there are some who just slips and misses.
Ooh, nice.
The tournament is held every April, and more than 70 people have taken part in this time.
Только удовольствие. Я перед собой других целей не ставлю. Весело, весело ни зрителям, ни жюри, ни людям, достающим из воды. Весело участникам на самом деле. Все ради этого и затевается. А мы участники.
It seems as some are more interested in showing off their outfits. They are apparently the ones who are not brave enough to get into the cold water. But it's not a total loss because at the end of the day, one of them could go home with the Best Costume Award.
Our next stop, Bolivia.
Creating a masterful piece of artwork requires water, some sand, and very manipulative sets of hands of a group of masters. A huge sand sculpture was produced in the hands of some 250 Bolivian and Peruvian artists in Bolivia's northeastern city, Oruro. The artists recreated Noah's Ark using sand to commemorate Holy Friday, the day that celebrates Jesus' trial and execution. A large group of visitors found the venue to see the sand artwork, which has been put into work on this day for the past 16 years.
We fly back home to South Korea.
BTS made the list of Time magazine's 100 most influential people of 2019. The biggest K-pop act co-stood at 17th on the artist list, along with pop star Ariana Grande and Rami Malek, who played Freddie Mercury in last year's global hit biopic, The Bohemian Rhapsody. BTS is writing history as they go with their new record, Map of the Soul Persona, recently topping Billboard 200 chart. They scored number one album 3 times in a year, which is an astonishing achievement no other band has ever reproduced since the Beatles. We hope the group extends its worldwide success and keeps releasing inspiring music for everyone around the world.
Our last stop is the US of A.
Have you ever wondered how dogs see, hear, and smell? If you did, then you must like dogs. And there was an exhibition in Los Angeles that you might have wanted to see. A science exhibit dubbed Dogs, A Science Tale was held at the California Science Center, and it has given dog owners an opportunity to better understand their companions.
Many people think that dogs are colorblind. Well, they're not. You can actually look and see how a dog sees the world. You can realize that they're hearing things that we never hear. And you can sort of test a little bit how they smell, because dogs, what they can't see because their vision isn't quite as clear as ours, they smell everything. That's how they experience the world.
We are still years away from developing a technology that could enable direct communication between owners and dogs. But even without it, paying a little more attention could help you understand your dog better.
Well, it looks like every country has their unique way of celebrating Easter. We just use hard-boiled eggs, unfortunately, with color paints on them. Do you know of any interesting or unique ways people celebrate this occasion? I understand there's liquid mistletoe involved in some countries.
Yeah, we talked about the Songkran festival the other week. And apparently, around the Easter times, in some Eastern European countries like Hungary, they sprinkle water to apparently young women, actually. And sometimes they ask for a kiss as well. So it's a kind of a romantic way of celebrating the Easter.
Depending on who's asking.
That's right. I will not be the one.
And moving to BTS, the sensational K-pop group that's doing South Korea proud. What makes them so different from the other K-pop idols?
Kind of pride of Korean people. I think it represents the soft power, and particularly like the fact that they did it from the humble beginnings. I think humble beginnings becomes kind of a heartwarming stories a lot of times, but they did it through communication, interaction with their base, actually, in political terms, I guess, their fan base, army. And this incredibly talented the group of boys actually kind of developed their artistic prowess and the fame through interactions. I think that there's a kind of element of Korean way of celebrating things, which is to have fun together, or dance together, sing together. So I think that it represents Korea in a unique way, and it's a validation that Korean culture can contribute and will contribute, is contributing to the development of world culture.
I find it interesting their anecdotes they shared during award ceremonies, how their management company, which was relatively unknown or inexperienced, said that you guys are going to be something one day, and they had a hard time believing that during the early years. Well, Professor Song, it looks like it's time for us to part ways again, but we appreciate you coming in and completing our program one more time.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all we could squeeze into our program today. For more, do tune in again, same time next week for a brand new episode of Point World Affairs. Thank you so much for watching.